American Girl dolls were the toy to have. I had two, and I remember doing everything with them. They slept in my bed, they rode around in the basket of my bike, and they even had their own chairs at our dinner table. Now, around this time, my younger brother was 4 years old, and although he had plenty of toys of his own, he was extremely jealous of my American Girl dolls. One day, he asked if he could play with them. My response was typical: "No, you can't, they're mine," something most kids would say to their younger siblings. But then I added, "You're a boy. Boys don't play with dolls." But why don't boys get to play with dolls? Why do girls get to play with dolls, princesses, and all things pink, and boys get to play with robots, trucks, and cars? Imagine you were taking a 3-year-old boy to the store to buy a toy. When you get there, he heads straight for the pink, girl-oriented toy aisle. He immediately grabs the princess doll off the shelf, and you can see his little eyes gleam with joy. What would you do? Would you buy the toy with him without saying anything? Or would you fight him on it and try to convince him to buy a different toy? The Scottish Social Attitude Survey found that only 40% of people would buy this little boy the doll without saying anything, while 60% of people would fight him on it and try to convince him to buy a different toy. My brother and I were extremely lucky because our parents were a part of the 40% of people who would buy this little boy a doll. I remember my mom walking into the room just as I was refusing to let my little brother play with my dolls, solely because of his gender. She said, "Who decided that? Who decided that girls play with dolls, and boys play with trucks or cars?" Now, our society has created these expectations for men and women that are often unrealistic and very stereotypical. Because they appear in our lives at such a young age, they're often the only thing we know. Whether you realize it or not, kids, teens, and adults are all pressured by gender stereotypes. Now, you may think that gender stereotypes is a problem of the past, but it isn't. A recent international study found that gender-based violence, especially violence against women, is often caused by gender stereotyping. SIDA, a Swedish international government organization, defines gender-based violence as any harm or suffering that is perpetuated against a woman or girl, man or boy, that has a negative impact on the physical, sexual, or psychological health, development, or identity of the person. The cause of the violence is founded in gender-based power inequalities and gender-based discrimination. Now, gender-based violence is not only an issue relevant for females, it's also relevant for males. Men can become targets of physical or verbal attacks for acting in less masculine ways. However, it's widely acknowledged that the majority of people affected by gender-based violence are female. Let's stop with gender stereotypes for a second. I want you all to pull out your phones and open Google. Go ahead, do it. Type in "headless woman in movie posters." I'll give you a second to do this, and while I do, let me explain to you a little bit about this project. The Headless Women of Hollywood blog was founded in 2016 by Marcia Belsky with the hope of bringing attention to the dehumanizing images of women that are still found in the books, movies, TV, and advertising today. They aim to reduce violence against women by shining a light on the harsh realities that most women face on a daily basis. Has your Google search loaded it yet? If it has, you're probably seeing a lot of shocking images. If not, take a look up at the screen where you can see what some of these posters might look like. How many of you knew about or recognized this issue before tonight? Almost nobody. That's the unfortunate part. These movie posters have become such a normal part of our lives that most people don't even give them a second thought. Now, you may think that this issue only applies to movies for older teens and adults, such as romantic comedies. But it doesn't. The media has started plastering headless women onto kids' movie posters as well. In 2015, the movie Minions was released to follow the hit Despicable Me films. How many of you heard of it? Maybe your kids went to see it, or maybe you went to see it yourself. Regardless, how many of you actually remember the movie poster for this film? Because of copyright issues, I cannot actually show you this movie poster, but I encourage you to look it up. When you do, take a second and really look at this poster. What do you notice appears on it? A headless woman. This is where we have our real problem. Not only does this gender-based violence against women appear in adult films, slowly, this idea has crept its way into the lives of our children. Now, the media doesn't seem to be putting an end to its inappropriate use of women anytime soon. So what can be done to ensure that gender-based violence decreases in the future? Let's go back to gender stereotypes, because this is the issue that started it all. But what can be done to prevent such a huge issue that dominates so many parts of our lives? We have to look to the future, and the future is children. Everything children hear or see has an impact on their views and attitudes as adults in the future. In the long term, by working with children to challenge gender stereotypes, we're also contributing to the prevention of violence against women in the next generation. So, what can you do to help? Start by thinking before you speak, especially when you're around children. Try not to make any generalizations about groups of people. Finally, just ask. Ask kids what kind of toys they want to be playing with. Ask kids what color clothing they want to be wearing. Don't let the stereotypes of the past and present interfere with the fresh minds of the future. Because if we do all this, we can prevent gender stereotypes. Thank you.